To my channel Vigangelical, please take a look at the links in my description. Take a moment to like, share, subscribe and comment on any or all of my videos. I'll welcome any feedback, whether it's around the way I do these videos or the content, so please feel free to let me know your thoughts. So when I first launched this channel not that long ago, the very first post I did was about Zouma, the footballer from West Ham United who got in trouble for abusing his cat. So what did he do? He kicked, slapped and chased the cat, threatening to kill it. And this made a lot of media. It was in the public eye for quite a while, and then sort of died down after his club fined him £250,000 and he lost a sponsorship deal with Adidas. So he took a financial hit, and his reputation was damaged significantly by this story, and it seemed to go away, but it eventually did result in him being charged with a criminal offence under the Animal Welfare Act. And yesterday he was finally convicted, and his penalty was 180 hours community service and just under £3,000 in court costs. So it cost him his reputation, it cost him his a dent in his wages for a short while. Bear in mind he's on a very significant wage, so the fine the club gave him was probably not that significant to a Premiership footballer, and his loss of income from advertising, from sponsorship, would have been far more damaging to him, I imagine. So what's the relevance of talking about him today? So when I did my first post, there were comparisons I made with him and a couple of other cases, the cases of Sarah Moulds and the case of Paul O'Shea. So I'm going to update you slightly on those, but also bring in the case of Archie Watson. So Archie Watson, who similarly to Zouma was yesterday convicted in a court of various offences. He'd been illegally killing wild birds, so there were 5 buzzards, 3 red kites and a herring gull amongst the birds he killed, and he was shooting them and dumping them down a well. He'd been, the RSPB and others had been tipped off about this, so they filmed him and caught him pretty much red-handed dumping the birds. When the police went to check his property, they found he was also in violation of various firearms offences. So he had guns lying around the place, ammunition, and the guns weren't kept in locked conditions. So what happened to Archie Watson, this gamekeeper? Bear in mind, gamekeepers and the hunt and shoot fraternity claim that they don't harm birds of prey. So the evidence shown in this case proves them to be liars, which is hardly surprising. So his penalty was exactly the same as Zouma's in terms of community service. He got 180 hours. He also had £288 in fines. So probably, according to his income, proportionate to Zouma's. He'd literally, Zouma had harmed and threatened to kill a cat. This guy had literally killed many birds of prey and other birds, and he had been caught red-handed with a number of them, I have no doubt at all he'd killed many more. So the other comparisons were with Sarah Moulds, who people may remember. She hit a horse, and that she was out with the Cottesmore hunt in November last year, and she was filmed hitting her horse, and that elicited absolutely loads of publicity. She's been her story's been covered by the media. It was literally saturating the media for a very long time. I can only assume the reason this was so highlighted is because she's female. I can't think of any other reason, because these kind of things happen all the time. You see huntsmen hitting horses regularly, not to mention what they do to other animals. So that was interesting, and what's happened with her compared to Kurt Zouma and Archie Watson. So Archie Watson, as far as I'm aware, hasn't lost his job. He hasn't lost anything other than the small fine he was given. I don't think it wasn't mentioned in the court briefing that he'd even lost his firearms licenses. So he seemed to lose very little. Kurt Zouma didn't lose his job. He just lost some finance and, again, a bit of community service. Sarah Moulds, who hit a horse, again, rightly charged for it, and rightly lambasted for it. She lost her job as a teacher. She lost her voluntary role in the pony club, and I would argue that is proportionate, and she deserved to lose both of those. I'd also argue that Kurt Zouma and Archie Watson should have lost their jobs too. So I think there's a little bit of prejudice going on in terms of sexism, in that why did she lose her job and her other roles, and these two guys didn't. All of them have committed heinous acts, and all of them deserve the same kind of punishment. So the other one is Paul O'Shea. Now, Paul O'Shea was exposed by North London Hunt Sabs. He was monitoring an artificial earth, and he caught a fox. He used a terrier, sent it down there, caught a fox, pulled it out and tortured it with a pitchfork. This was caught on camera. North London Hunt Sabs released the footage to a journalist who shared it on ITV News at 10, and it's been seen widely around the country and around the world. It's available on YouTube and Facebook and various other sources. So what's happened to Paul O'Shea? Tied in and linked inextricably with the East Essex hunt. As far as I can see, absolutely nothing. So whereas Kurt Zouma went to court and got a very light sentence, though he was punished by his employers and his sponsors, and Archie Watson went to court, got a very light sentence, apparently hasn't been punished by his employers. Sarah Moulds is going to court. She's next due to appear on October 17th. She's going to trial because she denies causing animal cruelty, despite the clear evidence of the footage shown of her hitting the horse. And she's lost her job, and her role in a pony club. So this is what's happened to those three. Paul O'Shea, who's deeply involved in the hunt, as far as I can see, absolutely nothing has happened. He's not been officially charged. He's had no court dates. There's no mention of what's happened to his job or his role. The hunt tried to deny he had anything to do with them, even though their very own publication named him the previous month as having quite a high profile role within their hunt. So I just wanted to update really on the inconsistency of both public perception, media attention and legal penalties for each of these cases. Every single one of them are despicable. Every single one of them should be penalised. Every single one of them should lose their jobs. As far as I can see, only one has lost their job, and that's the woman. That doesn't mean what she's done was right. What she did was hideous, heinous, and should be penalised. What it does show is that a woman is given far harsher treatment than the men for doing pretty much the same thing. She's hit a horse. It's absolutely clear. Just watch the footage. She's abused an animal and she should be penalised. Kurt Zouma kicked a cat, slapped it, threatened to kill it. He's not lost his job. He's got community service, a fine, and that's it. Archie Watson has killed numerous protected birds. He's got no real penalty. A £288 fine is nothing, and 180 hours community service. What ought to be happening is all of these should be getting similar sentences, and all of them in their community service should have it specified that they work for an animal charity or in animal welfare in order to help right their wrongs. They cannot do that. They can never right the wrongs they've done, but they can make amends for it by working in an appropriate way, and the court should have taken that into consideration and made sure that Kurt Zouma and Archie Watson's reparations reflected that, and made sure that any community service they do goes towards animal welfare. So that's my thoughts on that. I hope when Sarah Mould's case comes to court, she is penalised with the full force of the law. However, I think it's disproportionate to penalise her more than the others. They ought to be penalised more too. I'm not saying she shouldn't be penalised, I'm saying the others ought to be penalised at least as much, especially if you bear in mind the vulnerability of the animals concerned. All animals are vulnerable. They can't defend themselves. They're in no position to stop a human abusing them. Yet, if you think about it, kicking a cat and slapping a horse, I just don't know how I can say this without sounding like I'm defending one, and I'm not. The guy kicking a cat ought to be serving a custodial sentence, in my opinion, and he certainly should have lost his job. So I'd ideally like to see all four of these people serving custodial sentences, and Paul O'Shea being the worst of the lot of them, torturing an animal with a fork. And as far as I'm aware, he has not even been charged. So I hope Essex police pull their finger out and make it a priority to get this guy dealt with. And the Crown Prosecution Service ought to be ashamed of themselves if they don't prosecute him. Absolutely blatant, sick, disgusting behaviour. and he needs to be held accountable. So that's my update. Hopefully I'll be able to update you again. And I hope when I do, it's to tell you that Paul O'Shea's gone to jail, because that needs to happen.